So as you could have guessed from the title, in this video I want to talk about why I chose Fujifilm and why I use Fujifilm for all of my photography. So when I started out in photography, I used a Canon Rebel T2i and I loved that camera. I got myself that and a nifty 50, and that's the camera that I learned the basics on: shutter speed, aperture, ISO. And then from there I ended up buying a 5D Mark II and got some L glass. I had the 35 1.4L, the 135 f2L, which I really love. To this day, it's one of my favorite lenses I've ever used. And I had the 85 1.8, which is a fantastic lens for the money. Also one of my favorite lenses I've ever used. And one of my best friends had the 24 1.4L and the 85 1.2L, so I used those a little bit as well. And then I switched to the Nikon D750. And man, I loved that camera. It is, even today, it's such a great DSLR. And then Fujifilm came along, and I started taking notice of their X100 series, and I wanted to get one of those for times where I'm traveling or like I'm on a family vacation or something like that. I don't have to take along my Nikon D750 and myriad of lenses. I could just take that one camera along, and it kind of appealed to me because it was an APS-C size sensor and a small body, and the shutter speed dial and aperture ring around the lens, the way that you operated the camera really appealed to me. It was simplified and it made sense. So I picked up an original X100 and I was off to the races with Fuji. It was kind of my gateway drug into the Fuji system. As much as I loved using it, looking at the X-T1 really appealed to me even more because it was set up as kind of like a DSLR style where the viewfinder was in the middle. And then you had an ISO dial on the side as well as extra dials and rings that the X100 series really didn't have. So I say all that to say that the main reason I switched to Fuji like 3 years ago was because of the functionality and the usability of their cameras. It just is simplified and makes so much sense to me versus like your traditional DSLR does. So at the time, the X-T1 was the flagship camera, that and the X Pro 1. I ended up buying a used X-T1, used it for a little while, and then decided that I wanted to sell all my Nikon stuff and just shoot Fuji. So to me, the design of Fuji's cameras just is the best that's on the market out there. And of course, it's the best that I've ever used. Above anything else, the way you operate Fujifilm's cameras and the joy that it brings to use those just sits atop every other, like it's over every other spec. It trumps sensor size, it trumps having a full frame sensor for me, obviously. It's just the main reason why I want to shoot Fuji. So their cameras and their lenses really inspire me like no other camera system has. And I've even dabbled with the Panasonic Lumix G7, which is filming this right now. This is what I use for video. And I've dabbled and played around with it in photography because I had the 25 1.7, which is a fantastic lens. And I really love that camera, but it's just not fun to use. It's like using kind of like a high-tech computer versus using a camera. And the same goes for Sony. I played around with the Sony a7 III, and I've had a couple little like Sony cyber shots and stuff that my wife has had before, and which, by the way, the menu systems in those things are pretty much identical to like the Sony A series. And I just don't like the user interface. That's why I would really never shoot with a Sony, even though I think their cameras are awesome and the technology they bring is great and fantastic. I just wouldn't enjoy their cameras and I just wouldn't have fun shooting them. And that is, to me, the most important thing. So another reason I use Fujifilm is the image quality. Now, if the image quality of their sensors and lenses wouldn't be on par or at least as good as like what I was using in the past, then it really wouldn't be an option for me. At the end of the day, the fact that the image quality you can obtain with the sensors and the lenses gives me what I need for my work, and that's weddings, real estate, some personal work. And really the difference in image quality from my full frame systems in the past to what I'm using now, which is Fuji, the difference is really negligible at best. The dynamic range in the sensors is just fine for me. I don't really push my images and my sensors to the limit in real world shooting. But the times I've needed to pull back the highlights or push shadows, I've had plenty of dynamic range. ISO performance is just fine for me as well. I don't mind getting some grain in my images as long as they're sharp, and Fujifilm's lenses are sharp, so that's not an issue. Resolution, 16 megapixels, 24 megapixels, more than enough for my needs. The lack of an AA filter on the sensors paired with Fuji's prime lenses, it's just fantastic image quality. So the quality of the image you're getting versus the size and price of the entire system, for me, really hits a sweet spot. So sure, full frame sensors may perform a little bit better in dynamic range and ISO performance. It may yield a little more noticeable shallow depth of field, but all that stuff, it's so close for me, it's just negligible. So I'd rather not shoot with, any other brand of DSLR or mirrorless cameras, that's full frame. So I'm getting a little bit better image quality that honestly, 99% of the time in the real world, I'm not going to notice a difference anyway. So for what I do with my needs in the world of Fujifilm, I can kind of have my cake and eat it too. I can have cameras and lenses that I love shooting with and that are a joy, and I can have the image quality I want. Not just need, but image quality I want. The third reason why I shoot with Fujifilm is their lenses. Looking at their catalog of lenses when I first was thinking about switching over was another big nudge in that direction, because I like shooting with primes and I love their small and fast primes. If I want, I have my choice at plenty of f1.4, f2, and even f1.2 lenses available to me. They tailor make their lenses for an APS-C mount and sensor. So, it's not like you're shooting a Canon 80D with the 85 1.2 that was made for a full frame sensor. Their lenses really are just so fantastic, and the punch they pack for being in such a small package is just, I really love it. As a matter of fact, I think their lenses are on par, if not better, than the Canon L glass I used to use. And of course, they have an aperture ring around the lens, which adds to the enjoyable experience for me. So glass, glass, glass. I love their glass. Oh, and I will give a shout out to a third-party manufacturer, Samyang or Rokinon, because they do make my favorite ultra-wide angle that's available for the X system. While Fuji does have some options, they have a 10 to 24 and a newly released 8 to 20, I can't remember. It's another wide angle lens. Those are really expensive and a little bit bigger, and it's really not what I need. I just want a small, fast, ultra-wide prime, and the price is so good for that Rokinon. But I digress. Let me get to number 4, and that is firmware updates. Fujifilm do a fantastic job of keeping their cameras updated and not just fixing bugs, but adding new features. The X-T1 is a completely different camera now than when it was released in 2014. They released a solid camera with great image quality and, good functionality and usability. And instead of resting on their laurels, they continued to update it and improve it and give it faster autofocus and better features over the years, even when the X-T2 was released. The X-T2 recently just had a firmware update that provided a lot of great features, especially in the video area of things. So while the cynical side of some people may say, well, they just handicap their cameras upon release, and then they fix it and act like they're doing the customer a favor. And I don't know, maybe that's true, I'm not sure, but my rebut to that is, for me, they released a camera that I was willing to buy and was good enough for me to buy and own and use. So right off the bat, they already released a camera that I loved, and the fact that they improve it over time and just give me more features and better performance is just a win-win for me. So in conclusion, I shoot Fujifilm because the image quality is good enough for what I need to do personally and professionally, and they are fun tools to use, and that is what matters to me most. As long as the image quality is there, that kind of takes precedence. I loved the X-T1 when I first switched over, and even though it had one card slot, I shot a couple of weddings on it and did real estate work, but I really just never was comfortable only having that one slot, and it kind of irked me. So when the X-T2 came out, actually, it was about a year after the X-T2 came out, I ended up upgrading to that basically because of the 2 card slots. I wanted to know that any pro work I did, especially a wedding, that I had the reliability of having a backup. But the X-T2 has been a workhorse for me, and it will be throughout this next year. And then obviously I still have an X100 series I've owned 3 generations, so the original, the S, and now the T. And having the X100T, that's almost the perfect iteration of the X100 series for me. With the X100 and the X100S, I had my complaints, I had things I would have changed about those cameras, which is why I ended up getting the X100T. And honestly, I feel like that's kind of a completed, generation. Even though the X100F is out now and people are kind of clamoring for the upgrade to that one, when the next generation of that comes out, I'm gonna be 2 gens behind, and perfectly content with no complaints. So at any rate, I think I've probably rambled on enough in this video. I just wanted to share my thoughts and opinions on why I shoot with this system. I don't get really, I love tech and I love gear. It's part of the hobby side of me is liking the camera gear and lenses and kind of being a gearhead. So I have appreciation for pretty much every brand. I like what Nikon does, I like what Canon does, I like what Panasonic does, I like what Sony does. I have appreciation for all types of cameras. But really when it comes to shooting photography, for me, 100% Fuji is what holds my heart, and I don't have a desire to really shoot with anything else. Except for maybe like playing with some other systems just for fun. So anyway, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.